I pretty much knew I wanted to do something creative at a very early age. I saw The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad, a Ray Harryhausen film in 1957. I'm that old, yes. And it changed my life. That was the moment where I fell in love with fantasy, with dragons, with making things real that never existed. So it was pretty much from that moment on, my course was set.
As I got older, you know, kind of junior high age, I started programming programmable calculators, and my dad and I made a little programmable computer from a kit. And then by the time I got into high school, the first personal computers started to come out. So the Apple II, Atari 800, and one Christmas I woke up and there was an Atari 800 waiting for me under the Christmas tree. So that was very exciting.
I went to Sonoma State College for the second couple years after transferring from UCLA. And while I was there, I took a class called, I think it was the Psychology of Dreams or Psychology of something. But the professor, his name was Barry Godolphin, and he took us on a field trip down to Stanford Research Institute. And this would have been around 1972 or 3. And in this office, someone had a CRT with Space Wars playing on it. And I was blown away. I said, oh my God, this is a game. You could see it, you know, 2 little tiny spaceships, you could control them, you could shoot each other with it, and something shifted at that point. You know, I was always a fan of arcades. I was always, you know, loved going there with my father, or doing stuff with the coin-op games, but none of them were video at the time. They were all either mechanical, or occasionally I think we had some film-based ones. And this was amazing. And I don't think I had the thought right then, like, this is what I'm going to do, because I didn't know there was something you could do. But something shifted.
Back in those days, there were magazines that had games in them that you would type in BASIC. So you'd get a magazine, you'd sit there and just type every line in. It actually was a good way to learn how games work. You know, if you type enough of those in. You also learned that BASIC wasn't fast enough, and so I started to teach myself assembly language.
I trained as an electronic engineer rather than a computer science major, and I was working at National Semiconductor, kind of learning on the job some different parts of electronics that I didn't have in school, and had pretty much gotten all the training there that I really wanted, and I was thinking about where I might go next.
Oh man, I had no idea this was going to be my career. I totally fell into it. You know, I thought I was going to be a teacher, and you know, wear the tweed jacket and the patches on the elbows, and I was teaching film history, theory, and criticism classes at the University of Texas, and my advisor called me up and said, "Spector, you've been teaching for 13 semesters, and we've got to give your class to another PhD student. Teach them how to teach your class, and then take a hike." And it's like, oh my gosh, I was sitting there on the floor with a phone between my legs thinking, how am I gonna make the rent next month?
In 1976, my wife and I, Annie, decided to open a public access microcomputer center. It was a nonprofit called the Marin Computer Center. We got a loan, we purchased a bunch of computers with the idea that people would come in and rent time on them for $1.50 an hour. And we got a bunch of games, we had classes we taught, and part of the process was us both having the kids who came to the center review games that were out, early games from Broderbund, early games from Adventure International, and other companies that were starting to do games in the late 70s. These were compiled, they got printed in Creative Computing magazine.
When my tennis doubles partner, Al Miller, who was working at Atari at the time, sent me or showed me an ad that he was putting in the newspaper the next day, and asked me to proofread it and say, you know, read this ad and see what you think. And I actually read the ad, and what I thought was it looked like kind of an interesting job to design video games for Atari.
Well, all my career I've been a comic book writer. Started back in the late 60s as a comic book writer. Still write comics to this day. Created characters like Blade, who've turned into several movies, Teen Titans or Bullseye, Black Cat, 1,000 different characters for DC and Marvel and other places. And what happened was, whenever Superman Returns came out, I and another writer who was a friend of mine named Flint Dilley, who's also a game writer, were asked to work on the Superman game. They had a game already done, but they wanted us to come in and sort of fix it in some degrees. It's hard for me to explain exactly what we had to do, but the game was already done. So the two of us got in there, and that was the first time I wrote a video game that I was involved.
The phone rang, and it was a friend of mine, a gaming friend of mine, who was working at Steve Jackson Games, and he said, "You want a minimum wage job as an associate editor at Steve Jackson Games?" I said, "Yes!" So I just kind of fell into it. I had no idea it was a career, even when I was working there.
And I didn't really know what I wanted to program, so I just started imitating games that I saw in the arcades, you know, kind of the classics. I did a version of Space War and Frogger. I mean, they weren't classics back then, they were brand new. But so I did this Frogger clone that I called Froggy. It was written in hand assembly language for the Atari 800. And I just gave it to some friends. You know, there was no internet back then, but there was sort of a way that programs could get around. There were these things called bulletin boards, and you could dial into a phone number and you could upload a program to the bulletin board, and then other people could dial in and download from there. Only one person at a time. But that's the way programs spread, and so my game Froggy kind of spread around the country. And somebody down in California saw it, and it just said Froggy by Eddie Freeze, and they tracked it back to me. I was working in a pizza place at the time, and they just showed up one day and said they wanted to hire me to make games for them. So it was very exciting. It was much better than working in a pizza place. So that was how I got into the game business.
We eventually started doing conversions, which from hearing talks at this conference, that's kind of where a lot of companies started, is by taking someone else's game and doing a conversion to a different platform. And in our case, I started working with Scott Adams from Adventure International. We took his Radio Shack versions of his games and converted them both to CP/M-based computers and to the Apple II. And for the Apple II, we ended up having to create a kind of an add-on which extended the basic that came with the Apple II by giving it extra features that the Radio Shack computer had that it didn't have. That became a separate product called Apple Spice, but it included like a print search command, an if then else, and some fairly fast routines to do things that you just couldn't do otherwise, to make the conversion much easier so we didn't have to actually rewrite all the code completely. Found bugs, found suggestions for user interface improvements, and kind of learned how to do games by looking at other people's games.
I had actually attended a trade show called Gametronics the year before, because it was clear that games and electronics were going to be something big. So I was already kind of thinking that way. And anyway, I interviewed with Atari the next day at 10 a.m. and by 2 p.m. they made me an offer, and I told my boss I was giving him notice, and left 2 weeks later.
I had always played them, as I say, but I didn't know that they could be written. Because as far as I knew, they were always written in-house by the programmers or by a director or somebody like that, not an outside source. This was the first time for me I was asked to participate in it. And Flint was the expert in gaming, game writing, and he really helped me learn how to do the technical parts of the writing. I knew how to write, I mean, that wasn't a problem, and I knew games, so that wasn't the problem. But there are technical things you do when you're writing a game, whether it's writing in the Excel sheets or if you're writing in branching areas. Those are all technical, and you don't know those automatically. From there, I started to be picked up by other places, and I've been now doing game writing for about 8 years.
I've been working at Steve Jackson Games for a couple of years, and TSR made me the Godfather offer. They said, move to Wisconsin, we'll pay you $25,000 a year. And it's like I went, oh my God, $25,000 a year, I can't say no to that. That was probably when I knew. When I left Texas, left the PhD program I was in, my mom started crying, stopped crying about 2 years ago. that was probably the moment I knew it was a career. When did I know I was good at it? I don't know. I mean, I hate everything I've ever done. So, I'll let other people decide if I'm any good at it. I just want to do better next time out. That's kind of the goal. Just do better next time.
Well, the way I got started is kind of roundabout. It's an interesting way how I got into this industry. So way back, I wanted to be a comic book artist, and I did a lot of drawing. I did a lot of independent comics. I did some work for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles in the early days. I did some backup stories, some children's stories, some Spider-Man stories, this and that. So I always thought I was going to be this big-time comic book artist. But then I realized you don't make a lot of money. You spend about 18 to 20 hours a day in your room. There's no sunlight, there's no food, there's no people, there's no friends, there's no girls. So I decided to pursue a regular college career in education.
Yeah, you know, my two greatest loves growing up were always video games and music. But I never thought to ever put the two together, you know, as a career when I was young. But I could tell you that when I was 10 years old, this is in the late 70s, I used to take my dad's big cassette player and I'd take it down to the local arcade and local pizza parlor, and I'd record all my favorite video game music, and then I'd take it home and I'd record all my favorite home systems and things like that, and I'd record all the music and sound effects, and I'd splice the tape together, and then I'd invite my neighborhood friends over and I'd charge them a nickel, and I'd play back the cassette, and I'd jump up in front of the TV and I'd put my favorite video games behind me, and I would pretend to play along with the cassette and put on a show. So I guess those were actually the first video games live concerts, was back then in the late 70s. But so I don't know, I guess I just kind of manifested the whole thing.
I think I knew that I wanted to get into animation. At first animation because of cartoons, but then I figured out I couldn't draw. So I took some time off to go to college, and I majored in speech and drama, which is really kind of funny. And I took a break from video games for a while.
So I got an English degree, I majored in journalism, and then went on to law school. But all the time I still kept doing comics, drawings, cartoons, children's books. That was to put myself through school. I was failing through law school, wasn't doing very good, didn't like it, because I was actually playing video games all the time instead of studying, right? So I remember it was in May of this year, I won't mention when because it's a long time ago, but I got a copy of Contra, Konami's original Contra for the Nintendo Entertainment System. And with it came a copy of GamePro magazine, issue #1. I flipped through it, thought it was an interesting magazine. I looked in the back, and there was an art contest that you could win a $100 first prize if you won. So needing the money, I did this big drawing up, 25 characters, sent it in. Didn't hear from them for a couple weeks, forgot about it.
When I turned 21, I grew up on East Coast in Massachusetts, and then I turned 21 and I decided to go to California to be a musician, because, you know, that's what you do. And I drove out there all by myself. I literally left my parents crying on the doorstep. No job, no place to stay, no money, no friends, nothing. I mean, I just, you know, showed up in California by myself. And the only thing I really knew out there besides Hollywood was Disneyland. And I figured, oh, you know what? Wherever Mickey Mouse lives, that's got to be a pretty cool place.
I left school at 16. I kind of realized that I was going to get better at drinking and playing pool than I was at learning useful things, unless you want to become a pool player, of course. And I was out visiting my sister up in London, and I was traveling back the next day. I was sitting on the train, there was a newspaper there. I was looking through the paper, and I saw that there was a job for a sports television company, wanted a dispatch clerk. I thought, I could do that. And sports television, I watched that. You know, sending letters, how hard can it be? So very next morning, I rang up. Needless to say, I got the job.
My first job was working in the retail industry. I actually managed a Babbage's, so that's kind of where I, you know, played a lot of games. They actually encouraged you to take home games and play them. So every night after work, I would, you know, take home the latest NES game and you know, and find all about it, see if I can beat it, you know, Mega Man, you know, try and get to the end before my next shift. While doing that, I was also, you know, reading the magazines as they would, you know, come into the store, and, you know, I saw that and I went, you know what, I think I can do that. I actually want to do that. I wonder if there's actually a you know, place for me at a magazine.
I literally picked up a newspaper the first day I was there, and I saw a job for selling keyboards at a Guitar Center. And I'm like, oh, I can do that. And the first couple weeks, actually, I was in California. I was homeless. I was sleeping under a pier at Huntington Beach. And again, no money and nothing. So, but that first day I picked up the newspaper, saw a job. I went down there the next day. I said, hey, you got to hire me. I can do a great job. And so they hired me. And they said, you start tomorrow.
Then they gave me a call, and I was like, oh my God, I won the $100? They're like, no, idiot. This contest is really for little kids and crayons or pencil and magic markers, and here I sent in this big airbrush painted drawing. Long story short, though, they bought that piece. I made a relationship with them. I started freelancing for them, doing artwork as well as writing reviews because of my journalism degree. After a couple issues, they called me up and said, hey, we got a job opening at GamePro. You want to come check it out? So I went out for an interview, thought about video games, law school, video games, law school went bye-bye.
When I moved to Los Angeles, I scored a job writing for Girl Gamer. I had done an opinion piece for this other website called Gaming Angels about Lara Croft and the whole how her body has shifted over the years. With every title, her body becomes different. And that's really when I knew that I really wanted to be a video game journalist, because everybody that knows me knows that I have an opinion about everything.
So there I was working for the sports TV company and sending packages. I even sent packages to the FIFA team over in Canada, which was super exciting to me. But then it kind of dawned on me that I was spending more time playing video games, and people would come to me and say, hey, Paul, what games are coming out next week? What's hot? What's cool? And I'd spend more time talking about that and worrying about that, and I was booking days off to play Tomb Raider and Metal Gear Solid and the other games that were coming out at the time. And I thought to myself, well, I wonder if I could make games for a living or be involved in games, because I know loads more about that.
You know, I honed my writing skills, and eventually that made me break into pretty much, you know, being a video game critic. I helped start up IGN back in '97, and I was there for over a decade reviewing, you know, N64, GameCube, but my passion pretty much was writing about handheld games. So, you know, back in the day, I was hugely into the Atari Lynx, you know, and the Game Gear was there, and the Game Boy. And when I got into the IGN, the Game Boy Color came out, and Pokemon was one of the biggest games on there, and no one was covering that game. So that's where I found my passion, was just kind of like looking at the handheld and seeing how I could, you know, cover the system that no one else was doing.
So I showed up to this new job, not knowing anyone, and one of the only T-shirts I took with me, because, you know, I brought a couple pairs of pants, a couple T-shirts, I had a little two-seater car I drove across with, but one of the T-shirts I had that I was very proud of was a video game T-shirt. It was actually for the TurboGrafx 16, which had just come out. I mean, people didn't even know what TurboGrafx 16 was. And back then, no one had video game T-shirts. I mean, it's not like now you go into Hot Topic, you find them online. You know, back then, a video game T-shirt was a very, very rare thing, and I was very proud of this. And the way I got the T-shirt was I actually, the summer before, I stood in line at the state fair for like 3 hours to play TurboGrafx and then tell them what I thought of the game, and they gave me this T-shirt. So it wasn't even something you could buy back then. But anyway, so now I'm working, I have the TurboGrafx 16 T-shirt, and the very first person who walks in, the first customer I waited on, one of the first people I ever spoke to in California, happened to be a producer for a video game company right down the street, and Richard Branson was starting this new company, a new video game company, Virgin. You know, Richard Branson owned Virgin Airlines, Virgin Records, Virgin Megastores. Well, he was starting a video game company. It was called Virgin Mastertronic at the time, later changed its name to Virgin Games. And a producer from that company walked in, and he saw my T-shirt. He's like, "You play video games?" Yeah, what do you want to know? I proceeded to download 21 years of information about video games on this guy, and they hired me right on the spot. They said, "Hey, you want to make $6 an hour for playing video games for us?" And I'm like, "This California is all right." So I was in California 3 days, and I was in the video game industry, and that was over 22 years ago.
I was lucky enough to find another entry-level job where I was working technical support, answering phones, over at Acclaim in Knightsbridge in London. So I was there for a couple of years, and then the real breakthrough into making games happened because I worked with a guy called Alex Ward over at Acclaim. He was looking after acquisitions, and he went over to Criterion, and I was lucky enough, I must have made a good enough impression that he rang me up and said, would you like to come and work for me? And I didn't really hesitate. It was very much something that I wanted to go make games as opposed to just being involved in the publishing side. So I got to go over to Criterion where I worked on Airblade and then Burnout 1, 2, 3, Revenge, and then the start of what became Paradise. And until eventually heading over to LA for a bit, and then EA Vancouver where I worked on Skate, and then I came to Ubisoft in San Francisco where we just finished Rocksmith.
But you know, just as the video game industry is changing, so is the video game journalism industry, and more often than not, it seems to be very video focused. And I wasn't hired to sit behind a camera and read a teleprompter. So I saw the writing on the wall. So this was my opportunity to kind of get out of there and see where else I can go.
So anyways, I was with GamePro for quite a long time, for over 220 issues, and then an opportunity came to join Capcom. I got to jump the fence from writing about games and being on the editorial side to making the games and promoting the games. And I love Street Fighter, I love Resident Evil, I love Mega Man as a fan. So to go to that house and work on those products was a dream come true. I've been there ever since. Started doing creative services, so I do all the packaging. My group, we do all the packaging, design, point of purchase, cover sheets, manuals, things like that. But then I started also working on events because I had some events experience. So not only do I get to do creative services now, but I also run the events department, which is why I'm here in San Diego.
But the way I started doing music is every day I would bug the vice president of the company. I said, please, if you need music for any of the games, just let me do it for free. I'll do it for free. Just give me a chance, you know. And the very first game they were working on internally there that they need music for was a game called Prince of Persia, the original Prince of Persia. So I did the music for that, won a couple awards, so they made me the music guy, and that's how I started doing music for video games.
So I found this job at Sega working with Gearbox Software on Aliens Colonial Marines, and I'm having a great time.
Especially when it comes to video games. I know what I like and I know what I don't like, and having a genre, not a genre, but a vehicle, a portal, if you will, at Girl Gamer for me to be able to say what I want to say about a video game really struck a chord with me, and that's why, you know, 4 years later, I'm still a Girl Gamer, and I would never want to give up my job as a video game journalist ever.
My parents to this day still ask me when I'm going to finish my law career. I tell them to keep waiting. I love video games.
Well, as growing up, you never conceived that could be a job, you know, that you could grow up and like, I could write comics and I could write movies and I could write animated episodes of TV shows. It seemed impossible for me because I grew up, I was in remedial reading in elementary school, you know, and I tried to write, you know, the essays and stories I wrote in high school. My English teachers would be like, what's wrong with you? This is weird stuff, it's abstract. You can never be a writer, you know.
When I was 5 years old, I picked up a book in the library that was, it had Disney Merry Melodies and Steamboat Willie in it. And there were little pictures of Mickey Mouse turning the crank of a donkey, and musical notes were coming out of his mouth. And I just loved the magic of what was happening with this animal. I wanted to do that myself because I kept asking myself, where did that creature come from? What is his story? So at 5 years old, I kind of committed. I go, I'm gonna make my own creatures. And from that point on, I started drawing. I mean, I was drawing my whole life already, but at that point, I really started actually creating animals. So instead of copying other people's beings and animals, at 5 or 6, I started creating my own stuff. And from that point on, basically, I've drawn every day. I've created stuff every single day.
僕のゲームデビューは実はファミコンでもスーパーファミコンなくてですね、パソコンゲームで。
So when I was very young and I played video games, I actually started not on consoles like a lot of kids. I started on PC. I used a computer for my games, and that allowed me to learn a little bit about programming. So I started to get into assembly, and I kind of messed around as a hobby.
私絵を描くのが好きだったんで。 So in high school, I had a friend who liked to program in his spare time and just as like a hobby programmer. And like I said before, I like to draw and draw pictures and whatnot. So my friend and I, we got together and we tried to make video games, on these computers in our spare time. I would write the story and draw the pictures, and my friend would code it up for me. And that was really fun, of course. And just going through that with that experience with my friend, I can definitely say that was probably a sort of a stepping stone towards me wanting to work in the video game industry.
And so people look at Earthworm Jim and say, where did that come from? How did you do that? Well, I made an Earthworm Jim the day before I made Earthworm Jim, and the day after I made Earthworm Jim, and the day after that, and the day before that, and the year before that, and the year before that. Basically every day of my life I create worlds and create characters. You've only heard of Earthworm Jim because it had a killer video game attached to it. But every other character I've ever created, you don't get to see. So I'm already practiced the discipline of creating.
It wasn't really until I got into college, and I started getting to explore like different things and, learning about literature, and then I started meeting people in the comic industry and the video game industry. I hooked up with some guys from Zenescope, and they brought me in and offered me a chance to write on some of their graphic novels and do some of their kids' graphic novels, and then suddenly, 2.5 years later, I've written 20 books for them, and it's crazy, from Jurassic Strike Force 5, which is like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles with dinosaurs, to stuff with History Channel and Discovery Channel. It's like, it's all over the spectrum,
I was smart enough to know that, programmers and people in the game industry aren't necessarily the most popular with the ladies. So I was worried about that, and I decided rather than enter the industry as a programmer, I could do it from a different angle. And I was already a musician as a hobby, once again, in university, and I decided to enter the industry not as a programmer, but as a music composer, as a sound guy. So that's how I started at Capcom. I figured if I could create games, which I love, and also be popular with the ladies, I could do two birds with one stone and have a really good time.
When I was a child, I liked to draw pictures and like anime and manga and things like that. And so I knew when I was growing up that I wanted to do something fun and interesting in the entertainment industry like that. So when I was in college, initially I wasn't specifically looking to be in the video game industry, but I just knew that I wanted to do something fun and something that I could hold on to my my childhood dreams. So when I graduated college, I just thought I'd give Sega a shot. So I went for it.
And then the opportunity for video games came up because I started loving video games, and I go, oh, I want to create in that area. What would a character do? What would he be? So Earthworm Jim and all the characters, when Shiny said, are we going to hire this guy to be on our game crew? I sat down and I put on Fleetwood Mac Rumors, and by the time I was done, it was within about 45 minutes, I had created Earthworm Jim, Psychro, the Queen, Professor Monkey for a Head, basically the entire cast and crew of Earthworm Jim within about 45 minutes. It was really easy to make, like something you just fart out. What's really hard is to execute a video game and to make a great game. And that's to the credit of the original team. It's the team taught me how to make a great game. And without that great game, you would not know who Earthworm Jim was.
やはり一番大きなプロジェクトっていうか、もうやっぱ僕自身もやりたかってカプコン入ったっていうところのタイトルで言うとやっぱストリートファイターだったんですね。で、僕がちょうど大学の頃にストリートファイター1とかが出始めて、でプレイして、このゲーム。
Yeah, my career is kind of interesting that it's the reverse of a lot of people. The first project that I did at Capcom was probably the biggest game I'd been involved in, and that was Super Street Fighter 2X, or as it's known here in the West, Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo. I had just started at the company. I was already a Street Fighter fan. I loved playing in the arcade. I thought if I could play this and get involved in this kind of thing forever, I'd be a happy guy. And luckily enough, as soon as I started in the company, I began work on that game. So right out of the gates, first thing I did, huge title, big scale, very ambitious right out of the gate.
The fact that I get to do this for a living is just a privilege, and I feel very privileged that I get to come to Comic-Con as a professional, and walk around with this professional badge and do interviews, and do press and stuff. So it's the greatest thing in the world. I love my life. I love that I get to sit in a Starbucks and write and not have to go to an office. You know, my office is wherever my laptop is, and how much better of a life is that? You know, what more could you possibly ask for?
I have been playing games all my life since I was 10 years old, and I love video games. I love talking about video games and analyzing them. I had just gotten out of the Air Force. I'd been in the Air Force for 6 years, lived in Germany, went to Saudi Arabia, moved to Austin, Texas because I loved it growing up. It was a place where we went to survival camp during the summer and things like that, and had a good friend living there. So I moved to Austin. I was unemployed, and people started saying, hey, you play so many video games, you talk about video games constantly. I was a writer and a video game player, and they said you should probably come work at this company called Origin.
I was going to go into law. So I didn't really grow up thinking that I was going to end up in video games, but when I look back on the choices that I've made, I'm actually happy that I ended up in video games. It's so creative, so fun, and the people are wonderful. These are like my people. You can stop anybody here at Comic-Con and bring up a game from 10 years ago. Portal, did you play it? Oh my God, yes. And you share an instant connection because it's entertainment. Law, not so much.
A very pivotal game called Ultima Underworld had just changed my life, and I knew that Origin had published Underworld, so I started trying to get a job there. I played on the company's softball team. I played role-playing games in the boardrooms at night. I even went skydiving with one of the teams one time. I jumped out of a plane with Lord British and those guys, and I could not get a job. I tried and I just could not get a job there.
So I was in college. It was my first year of college, and one of my best friends, Steve, he worked for the gamekeeper at Sunnyvale in a mall, and we used to play D&D together all the time, all sorts of different geeky games. He told me, hey, I just got a new job. I'm going to quit the gamekeeper, and my job, you're never going to believe this, is to play games all day. And I'm like, okay, yeah, joke's over. So no, what's your new job? He said, I just joined quality assurance, and that means I'm going to play a PC game before it is released to the public, and I'm looking to see what's wrong with it. I track what's wrong with it. I track those reports. They give me a new build. I make sure that these bugs get fixed, and that's what I do all day. And I said, okay, you need to share. How do I do this? He introduced me to the manager. There was an opening for another tester, and the next thing I knew, I was spending more time playing PC games than I was paying attention to my college work.
At a certain point, there was an ad in the paper, wanted tester of video games, $7 an hour. And I applied and immediately got the job, and that's where I started, the bottom rung of the ladder.
Yeah, so I broke into the industry by getting an internship at Microprose. And my first game that I worked on was Civilization. And it was a pretty cool experience to, kind of get my foot in the door there. Worked on the Civilopedia for the most part, doing all the artwork for that. Then I also did a lot of the bringing it down to like EGA graphics, going from 256 color graphics to 16 color graphics. So that was a big part of my job.
The next thing I knew after that, I was writing a clue book for the game that I had been testing for 3 months, and that sort of led to less time in college, more time playing games. That was my first job, strategic simulations, and I got to geek out playing Dungeons & Dragons and all sorts of RPG games. That was back when computers could be tested with the only 3 configurations that were possible. There were 3 soundboards at the time and 1 PC chip. So we would take a computer apart, put it together in the 3 configurations, make sure the game functioned, and then release it to the public.
So for me, I mean, I really enjoy playing video games, but what I really want to do is take video games to the next level. So one of the things that video games really inspired me to do, I mean, I have like a console modification background, and it was always cool to me to be able to say, hey, I can put this game in my Game Boy, and then I can actually, switch between crystal oscillators and overclock the speed, or overclock or underclock the Game Boy. That's something really cool, and that got me interested in electronics, and I learned a lot from that. And when I started working in VR, it was the same thing. Playing these games, being the promise of being able to experience them in the best way, that's what kept me really learning and innovating and innovating and innovating and committing time to this.
The first few years I was in video games, I was mostly supporting other people. I was lead tester of System Shock, working with this company called Looking Glass that was profound in terms of game design and technology, and I learned tremendous amounts from them. Love that company and the games they made. I worked with Warren Spector and Richard Garriott at Origin, and all the games at Origin were very ambitious. And probably the game I'm best known for is Deus Ex, which was a hybrid of shooter and role-playing game that had multiple solutions to all the problems and allowed the player to express himself ethically as well as tactically. So you could try not to kill people, you could try to find other solutions for your problems. And it was a very ambitious game, and to this day I have people walking up here at QuakeCon and saying, thanks for Deus Ex. And it's great, a whole team of people made Deus Ex, and we were very fortunate, at the right time, at the right place and all that, but it's very gratifying that it still resonates.
And the quality assurance department is basically the mailroom of video games. That's where you start out. That ended up leading to my next job, which is to join the Sega QA department, and I sort of worked my way up from there.
You know, it's funny, I remember my very first year of college, my mom came to visit me in the second half of the year, and back then we didn't have the information superhighway, or I think you call it the internet today, and she asked me to take her to the school's library. And I was like, the library? And I had no idea where the library was, because most of the time I was sitting around playing video games. And at the end of the trip, my mom, who started to clue in that probably I was playing a lot more games than I was doing studying, sat me down and gave me a good lecture about, hey, you know what, I'm playing video games, it's a waste of your time, you need to be doing more productive things, and you're never gonna make a career for yourself playing video games, so you better hit the books. Kind of actually not that true. It turns out playing video games are super productive. So, for me, obviously, it led to just a great career in making video games. But I do think there's so much to learn from playing games. There's great hand-eye coordination skills. And again, I think the industry as a whole is starting to deliver experiences now that actually do teach you skills that help you in other parts of your life. So, hey, Mom, I know I wasn't studying too much, but playing video games, it actually helped my life a lot.
I'm asked on a regular basis how to get in the gaming industry on Twitter and in person when I run into fans at conferences and things like that. Now in 2013 and beyond, it is easier than ever to get into the industry. And how do you want to become a good chef? Start cooking and burn a lot of dishes. You just don't become a great chef just by eating food and sitting around all day long. That's how you get fat. Get off your butt, learn 3D Studio Max, learn Visual C++, do something and post it on the internet and continue to chase after it, because the dream is there if you want it.
Yeah, so the best advice that I think I could give people in trying to get into the industry is really just do it. Basically what I mean is, if you want to work on an app or do something with other people, that's a great way to start. Working on mods for games is a good avenue. Work on whatever craft is, whatever area of gaming that you like. If you're an artist, really just practice over and over again, whether it's illustrating something, drawing, painting, doing things on the computer, modeling, whatever it is that you do in the arts. If it's programming, really just practice and practice by making different software, working on software, looking into other people's software, and those types of things. Really those that do it and practice over and over again really find something that they can use to get into the industry, I find.
Whenever anybody asks me, how do I break into the industry, I send them to UnrealEngine.com. This is where you'll find a link to download the latest Unreal Engine technology. This is the same technology we use to make games like Gears of War and Infinity Blade and Fortnite, and it's a technology used by hundreds of developers. In fact, in 2012, 4 of USA Today's top 12 games were made with Unreal Engine technology. It's available for free. Anybody can download it and use it for non-commercial purposes, to learn how to make games, to learn the tools that we use, and then if they want to go on and do something commercially, it's really inexpensive and easy to get going with it, make a great game and ship it. So that's my advice. Go out there, get your hands dirty, make something. If you're an artist, put your art into a game environment, create some levels. If you're a programmer, write some scripts, learn Kismet, do something that makes game characters move forward. So I think we're giving you the tools to go out and create your own 3D virtual resume. Do it. That's what people want to see. They want to see your work and how creative you are.
You got to have a passion for it. And it's easy to say, right? But you got to really love games. You can't just like playing games and this is all I do. I have no social life. I don't do anything else. You have to have a passion for the product. But just like anything else in life, if you really believe in what it is, you enjoy doing it, then it doesn't even matter if you make money. Okay? If you have that kind of passion and pursue whether you want to be a designer, you want to be in QA, you want to market the games, you want to be in PR, you can do all those things. If you believe in the product, you're willing to live, eat, and breathe this product, this industry. That's how you get into the business. And the other thing we were telling folks is be brave. Be willing to take risks. There's going to be rejection. There's a lot of people also want to come in here. But a lot of people also give up. It's real easy after a couple rejections, all right, I'm going to try something else. It's those that stick through. And the reason you stick through is because of your passion. Believe in yourself.